If clients ghost you after you send the quote, your price may not be the real problem. Your client may be reacting to uncertainty. They may need your service. They may like your work. They may even believe you can help. But if they do not feel enough trust yet, the next step feels risky. And this is where many service providers lose clients without noticing it. At a marketing conference in London, I heard 3 ideas from Rory Sutherland, one of the leading voices in behavioral marketing. They can help you reduce uncertainty for your clients, build trust before the decision, and make it easier for your clients to move forward. Because the moment you send the quote, the client is not only asking, can I afford this? They're also asking, do I feel safe saying yes? And if the answer is not clear, they hesitate. Sometimes they ask for more time. Sometimes they compare you with someone cheaper. Sometimes they just disappear. So let's start with the first idea. The first mistake is trying to win the transaction before you have built the relationship. Rory's idea was invest in relationships, not transactions. This sounds obvious, right? But most service providers do the opposite without even realizing it. And I used to be like that. We try to get the booking before the client feels understood. We send the quote before the client feels safe. We try to close the deal before the relationship has enough weight. It is like asking someone to cross a bridge before they can see if the bridge is strong. And you know it is strong, but they do not know it yet. And that gap is where hesitation lives. You explain the service, you send the proposal, you wait for the reply, and then nothing. You check your inbox again, and still nothing. And the first thought is usually, damn, maybe I was too expensive. But often, the real problem started before you sent the price. The client did not yet feel this person really understands what is at stake. That is where the relationship begins. Not when the contract is signed, not when the invoice is paid, but it begins when the client feels understood. For example, if you are a translator, your client may think they need just a translation. But what they really need is confidence that their message will work in another market. If you are a photographer, your client may think they need just photos, right? But what they really need is confidence that the images will support their brand, create the right feeling, and make them look credible. So the relationship is not a small talk. It's not about being nice for the sake of being nice. The relationship is the safety system around decision. Because when relationship is stronger, the next step feels safer. But relationship alone is not enough. Because a client can like you and still hesitate. That brings us to the second idea. Sometimes the best way to grow your business is not to add more information. It is to remove anxiety. And just look at the example of Uber. Uber did not only improve access to taxis, it removed uncertainty. Before Uber, you could be standing outside of the pub at the curb of the road, wondering where the car was, how long would it take, whether the driver was coming. And the problem was not only transport. The problem was feeling of not knowing. Now, you can stay in the pub, enjoying another pint with your friends, and track the car on the phone. Same basic need, get from A to B. Completely different feeling. And that is the second idea. Not just technology, but psychology. And for service providers, this is huge. Because your client is also waiting outside the pub at the curb, wondering, Is this the right person? Will this work? Will I receive the work on time? And will they really understand what I need? And if your communication does not reduce that feeling, uncertainty grows. Not because there is no interest, but because there is not enough certainty yet. So your job is not only to explain the service. Your job is to help the client stop waiting outside the pub and finally see the car coming. For example, if you are a translator, this means showing that your work protects meaning, tone, context, and trust in another market. And if you're a photographer, this means showing that the shoot is not just a camera and a nice location, but it is planning, light, story, brand feeling, and the impression your client wants to create. But there is one more problem. Even if the client understands what you do, they may still compare you with everyone else. And this is where many service providers become easy to replace. They explain the service, but they do not show their thinking. And when the client cannot see your thinking, they compare your price. And that brings us to the third idea. Sell how you think, not what you do. And this changes the conversation. Because when you only explain what you do, you sound like everyone else. You translate documents, you take photos, you create content, you design websites, and all of this may be true, but if that is all the client sees, they can put you next to 5 other people and ask, who is cheaper? When you show how you think, the client starts to see your judgment, your standards, the way of seeing the problem, your ability to notice what they may not notice yet. For example, a translator can say, I translate business documents. That is clear, but easy to compare. Or they can explain why machine translation may sound correct but still fail commercially. Why a literal phrase can damage trust. Why the right word is sometimes not the direct word. Now, the client sees thinking. A photographer can say, I take brand photos. Again, clear but easy to replace. Or they can explain why their own background can make a premium brand look cheap. Why light changes how people feel about a brand. Why composition can guide attention. Now, the client sees thinking. And that matters because your thinking is often the real value. The client may not know how to judge the final result before buying, but they can judge the way you explain the problem. They can judge the way you ask questions. They can judge whether you see the bigger picture. And that is how trust starts to grow. So let's bring back the moment where the client ghosts you after you send the quote. The problem may not be the price. The problem may be the uncertainty around the price. The client may not understand why this is the right solution. They may not understand what risks you are removing. They may not understand what makes your approach different. They may not feel safe enough to say yes. So before you ask, was I too expensive? Ask another question. Did I build the relationship before I asked for the decision? Did I reduce uncertainty before I sent the price? Did I show how I think, or did I only explain what I do? Because your client does not need more pressure. Your client needs less uncertainty. And when you reduce uncertainty, you make trust easier. There is the connection between these 3 ideas. Invest in relationships because people move forward when the next step feels safer. Use psychology because decisions are not only logical, they are emotional. Sell how you think, because your thinking what makes your service harder to compare. And in the next video, I will share a practical framework for using this when you talk about price, prepare a quote and explain your value without sounding defensive or pushy. No more clients ghosting. Subscribe and watch the next video. Let's grow together.